Hello! This video is super important and it's about wrapping up your work. So clay is a material that through exposure to air dries. It sets up, it gets harder. So it's really important that we keep it at the stage we want it at. And we do that by wrapping it up. If you were to start making something and walk away from it and just leave it out, it would get so firm, you couldn't do anything else with it. Depending on how long you left it, you could come back to something that was completely bone dry and you couldn't do anything else to it. So when we wrap things up, depending on the stage it's at and what you're trying to do, you do different things. So if I have a piece that I want to keep it at the stage it's at, I'm going to put it down on plastic and I'm going to spritz it with water in a spray bottle. And make sure the spray bottle is on mist, not on jet. You don't want a stream of water, you want a mist. So cover all the surfaces, and I'm gonna tightly wrap this up. I wanna make sure that air cannot get to this. Make sure that I don't have any gaps. Make sure I don't have big holes in the bag I'm using. Usually we use a lot of reused plastic for this, but with the pandemic, there are plenty of new bags. Please take a few new bags and use those for your work. Reuse them for your own work, but don't shove them back in the cabinet for other people to use at this time. So that's kind of basic. Like, I'm gonna spray this thing, wrap it up nice and tight. Now, if I have a piece that I would like to set up a little bit, but not a lot, I don't want it to really get hard on me, but maybe it's really wet and I need it to kind of dry. I would take my piece and instead of wrapping it up like that, maybe it's on a board or maybe it's not, but I would take a bag and fill it with some air. It's a little hard to see. Fill it with some air and tuck underneath the edges all the way. And then I've got air in there with the piece, and that helps it dry some, but not a lot. That's another way to do it. Basically, anytime you wrap something on a board or a bat, it's going to expose it to more air. So if you're trying to keep it from drying out, you need to make sure you get the bag in between the board and the piece. So whenever you're doing hand building, remember to get that in between there. Also, you can do things like taking, if there's an area of your piece that you don't want to dry, like the lip of a coil built piece, you can wrap a small piece of plastic around the piece you want to not get firm. And then, you know, you can wrap it more loosely, the tenting way, but this area that's covered with the plastic with a spritz. So basically, so it sticks down. So like if I wanted this top section, for whatever reason, to not get dry, or not get set up, I would stick this plastic down to it really well, and then I could tent the rest of it and tuck the edges under, and the rest would get drier, this wouldn't. Now, that's not really something I want to do in this case, but it's just an example. Same thing with things that are really, really wet, like things you've just thrown. You need to cover them. We don't want to like smash the plastic onto it because you're gonna mess up your piece. What you do is you gently drape. So with something that's just thrown, it's gonna be stuck down to the board. There's like long, thin boards you use. So in that case, what you do is you're going to take a bag and just gently drape it over it. Try not to smash at all or to really pull against it. You don't want to do that. So you just kind of drape and then gently pick up the whole board and get the edges underneath the board and let it dry that way until you come back, as long as you're not going to be gone for multiple days. And then it'll start to set up, and then once it's set up a bit, you can remove it from the board and then wrap them up properly. So wrapping your work is super important. We need to control the consistency of the clay and the stage of dryness it is at any given time. So keep that in mind as you're doing that. Always wrap up your work nicely, or at least be intentional about what you're choosing to wrap and not wrap. If you're leaving it out, make sure you're keeping track of it and you're there, or you're going to come back in an hour or something to look at it. Same thing with like your recycling clay when you're going to have clay to reuse. Keeping it wrapped when you're not there and planning on reworking it so it doesn't get too hard and dried out. And I think that is it. So talking about tenting, talking about wrapping tightly, talking about spritzing the piece, because even if I want the piece to stay like this and I wrap it up tightly, if it's wrapped up tightly, even for a little while, it can actually get harder. Plastic is not impermeable, so spritzing it is important to help seal all that down. Sometimes I'll even like throw a piece of cloth over the plastic, or a double plastic it if I'm going to be gone for a while and I really don't want it to get any drier. If your piece is finished, you can just leave it uncovered. If you've done everything you want to do to it, just make sure you've done everything you want to do to it. You can throw a piece of cloth over it. It makes it dry a little bit more slowly. And yes, just be super, super mindful of not leaving things out unintentionally and getting things wrapped up appropriately, because it's very frustrating to put a lot of work into something and then it gets harder than you want it to and you can't do what you need to do with it. So that is wrapping your work. Always, always, always be mindful of the consistency of the clay and what you want it to do so that you can be successful in what you're doing.